All right. Hello, everybody. This is Brian Lysing with Financial Brokerage, and this is the sequence of returns. Does it really matter in retirement webinar? And we're going to be focusing on exactly what is the sequence of returns and how a cash value life insurance policy, such as an indexed life insurance policy, can really help clients out during their retirement years. If you're not familiar with Financial Brokerage, we are a national marketing organization working with agents and financial advisors all around the country in the areas of life insurance, annuities, long-term care, disability income insurance, critical illness, and Medicare supplements. I've been here for just over 20 years now after spending some time out in the field selling primarily life insurance to clients like many of you are doing right now. And I've been assisting some of you who are on the webinar and other folks just like you all around the country for that time period. So today's webinar comes to us really from some marketing pieces that were put together by three of the companies that we do business with here at Financial Brokerage, and they all offer Index Universal Life, Equitable, Mutual Omaha, and North American. And they all had a piece on this very concept, and I thought this is maybe one of the most exciting things along the lines of retirement planning out there, and I think one of the least talked about components of a client's retirement plan. So if you can be the person who brings this up to a client, chances are that no one else has ever spoke to them about this before. You have an opportunity to come away looking like a hero in the situation. They're going to be asking their other advisors, hey, why didn't you tell me about this? We didn't discuss this. What if this happens to me? So, what is this? What is the sequence of returns? Well, that's what we're going to cover to start with. And we're going to, look at, well, does it really matter? What happens if you have high returns early on in retirement or high returns later and negative returns to start? What if your returns are level across the way? That'll never happen, but we'll look at that scenario anyway. And then, of course, we're going to take a look and see how IUL can help people in that situation. So, what is the sequence of returns? It's really just the order of positive and negative annual returns. And we'll see some examples here where we look at the stock market returns in various years. But you never know when a client retires if they're going to be retiring into a down market or an increasing market. And it does make a big difference. And in fact, if your clients, when they take money out in retirement, they're essentially selling into a loss, right? People always say you need to buy low and sell high. Well, if the market's declining and you need the money anyway because it's your retirement income, you're doing the opposite. You are selling low, and that can make a big difference on the bottom line over several years. Before we get into that, though, we're going to take a look at a scenario where the sequence of returns does not matter at all. And we've got three examples here which really bring that to light. And hopefully your screens are large enough to see this. If you have a laptop like I do, it may be a little difficult right now. But what we have here are stock market returns over a 25-year time period. And we have a client who started with $250,000 in each of these scenarios. And in sequence A, on the far left, what's happening here is we have a stock market that is going like gangbusters in the early years, right? And then in the late years, we start to see some losses. And we can see what our clients left with at the end there, just over $1 million. They started with $250,000. Not bad over 25 years' time, right? Well, what happens if we see the opposite scenario of returns with the stock market? We have a lot of losses early on, but then we have the gains later at the end of our 25-year time period. In fact, these two columns, all they have done is flipped the returns, right? So one is the opposite of the other. But you know what? We still end up at just over $1 million. It's the same figure. So here's another what if. What if we averaged all those returns together and our client received a 6% rate of return every single year for 25 years, where would we be? Well, we're going to be in the same spot, right? It all comes to the same dollar figure at the end. So in this scenario, it makes the sequence of returns makes absolutely no difference at all. So why the heck are we talking about this? Well, what you're seeing here is the accumulation phase or the contribution phase of a person's retirement plan. They're not taking any money out. This is when they're putting the money in, right? So this whole sequence of returns doesn't matter on the front side of things at all. We're going to end up in the same place, no matter what we do. Now, everything is going to change in retirement. When we start taking money out of this portfolio, now the sequence of returns is going to play a big, big part in the amount of money our clients have when it's all said and done. So now we're going to take a look at the same sequences of returns as we saw in that previous slide, right? But now our client is retired, and they need $85,000 a year to come out of their retirement account. Well, if we look at our first column, sequence A, this is once again where the market is going like gangbusters early on, and then it doesn't perform so well near the end of our 25 years. But our client can take 85 grand a year and still have almost $1 million left at the end of year 25. Okay, that's not bad. They timed it right. The market was up when they retired. Now, what if we have the opposite market returns? It's down early and it's up later. Well, our client will never know because they're never going to make it that far. They're the same 85 grand at that pace, they run out of money after about 10 years. And the only difference is, the market timing, the sequence of returns. Okay, so that's we know the market was down early on and we're taking money out, selling into loss. We understand that's not the way you want to go. Oh, what if we had a 6% average rate of return every year? We're not dealing with any losses, right? Well, our money still doesn't last as long. We don't get to that year 25 with just the average return. We need those really big market gains early on, right? Or we're going to run out of money. Here's another way to take a look at this. We'll see the example on the next slide here. But we're going to take a look at two different market time frames. And these are actual returns pulled from the S&P 500. We're going to take a look at a couple of retirement accounts, both starting at $1 million, and our client happens to be age 65. They need 68 grand a year coming out, and we're going to increase that by 2% every year. So now we're going to start mimicking actual retirees with actual historical market returns, right? First one, we've got a client that retired in 1973. Second client retired in 1982. And you're going to see here what a big difference retiring in the right market can make if you have a traditional retirement plan. So on the left, we have our client who retired in 1973. And you know what? They're out of money by the time they're age 86. They're left with zero in there, right? Now let's look at our other client who retired in 1982. The market was in a little bit different place, right? Their sequence of returns was much, much different. They didn't have those big losses early on like our 1973 retiree did. Well, now at that same age of 86, they've got, $6, maybe $8 million in their account. I mean, they're still taking the same withdrawals. So when a person retires, it makes a big, big difference. The problem is you can't plan for this. We don't know what the market is going to be like in those first few years after somebody retires. We always say you really can't time the market, and that's so true here. You're going to get lucky or you're not, right? So actually, here's the same example, but in graphic format rather than looking at all those numbers on the screen. All right, the blue line at the bottom is our client who retired in 73. The green line is our client who retired in 1982. Again, same money coming out of the account, but drastically big differences in where they end up at the end of their retirement years. Here's another way to look at this too, this comparison. We know the market was down early on in our 1973 comparison, but you know what? What if we averaged the returns in these two time frames? You would think that 1973 scenario would be much worse, right? But if you look at the average returns over time, that second scenario, it's only 0.06% better. So even if we took the average returns, these two scenarios are virtually the same. So it all boils down to the timing. All right, so now we get into a potential solution. How can we help our clients with this potential situation? Well, what if they had a safe, low-risk alternative that they could pull money from in those down market years so that they didn't have to sell into a loss? Would that make any difference, right? And so we're going to see an example here pretty quick using an index universal life policy as that safe alternative to pull from. Now, index universal life provides, in addition to money that we can take out via loans, does provide a tax-free death benefit to the client's family. We're going to utilize the loan feature, and since it's an index product, there's no market risk. You cannot lose money in one of these because of a market downturn. So let's take a look at our case study, and this time we're going to look at that 1973 scenario. But in the years when the market is dropping, we're going to take the income we need out of our life insurance policy instead. And you can see here our client needed $68,000 a year out of their traditional retirement account, increasing with inflation every year. We're only taking just over $50,000 in year 2 from the life policy. Now, the difference being we don't have to pay taxes on this, right? If we take out loans from a IUL that was designed properly, that is after-tax money, so we don't need as much. Out of the retirement plan, this is a qualified plan, and we have to pay taxes on that, so that's where you'll see a little bit of a discrepancy. But if you look down at the very bottom of the chart, when we don't have to sell into a loss for just 5 years out of 25, we now have over $3 million left at age 86, plus a little residual death benefit on that IUL policy, right? Just by directing a little bit of money into an IUL so that we can utilize that account. We've made a tremendous difference in this client's retirement income. So I've got 3 examples in this webinar. So we've seen one of them. Let's take a look here at our second example. This is Tom. He's 65, ready to retire. He's got $1 million saved up. He needs $100,000 to live per year. We know some of that's coming from Social Security and a pension, so he needs $70,000 to come out of his savings, right? And thankfully, Tom's agent or advisor saw this webinar, and they knew what to do to help Tom because he has a permanent life policy that has accumulated cash that he's going to be able to tap into. So if Tom didn't have that, though, here's what his retirement might look like. He takes $70,000 a year. Again, we're increasing every year for inflation. And at the end of year 20, Tom's got just under $500,000 left in his nest egg. Okay, it's not too bad. He's not doing nearly as bad as our previous person was. But our advisor saw the webinar. They helped Tom out with an IUL. And now he has this alternative account to draw money from in retirement, right? So again, when the market is down, he's not going to pull it out of his qualified retirement plan. He's going to pull it out of his IUL. Once again, we don't need the full $70,000 because this money is not taxable. And now Tom has got over $3 million left in his traditional retirement account just because for 5 years out of 20, right? He didn't have to sell into a loss. That's a huge, huge difference. And once again, here's the same situation in graphic format. That bottom line you see, that's if Tom just used his traditional retirement plan that people are used to and most everybody puts money into, and they rely on that to get through retirement. But the darker blue line that goes up as you look towards the right of the page, that's Tom's retirement account if he had an IUL to supplement in those down market years. All right, let's take a look at our final example. And, I thought it was helpful to have different examples in here to highlight, the fact that we don't know what the market's going to look like when a person retires. It's one thing to just look at the 1970s or the early 80s. But what if we look at maybe a more recent time period here, the 2000 through 2019? Almost everybody who you'd be speaking to can very clearly remember these years and know what the market was doing. In fact, we had, we started off with the market being down and took a huge, huge dip in 08, and we've had some highs and lows along the way. But in this particular example, our client starts with $1.5 million. They're withdrawing $50,000 a year, indexed for inflation, and they have about $200,000 left at the end of year 20. Well, here's our what-if scenario, right? What if our client didn't have to sell into a loss in those 5 down years, in the big market crash of 2008? They didn't have to sell into that 38% loss. They didn't have to sell into the 13 and 23% losses early on in 01 and 02. They were taking that money out of their life insurance policy instead. So now instead of being left with only $200,000 in their account, they have over $700,000 in their account. And again, this is a more recent time period that we're considering. So again, the sequence of returns and having a side account that a client can draw from makes a huge, huge difference over the course of a person's retirement years. And I would bet that most clients have never considered this. Nobody has ever brought this to their attention, right? So, and to kind of recap, we know we can pull this money from the IUL, and it offers some great advantages to our clients. We get that upside potential, but we have absolutely no downside market risk. Right? We don't have to pay taxes. If you saw my webinar 2 weeks ago on the big 3 advantages of IUL, you'll realize or remember that typically IULs will have lower expenses built into them than almost all of the other retirement planning products that a person might be putting money into. Of course, we do have the tax-free death benefit if they pass away along the way, or even if they get to the end. The death benefit is reduced by any loans that are outstanding, but there will always be some sort of residual death benefit there to go to the family. And then most policies now too have a long-term care or chronic illness benefit that you can add on, or it's built in. So if our person needs some extra money to pay for the high cost of LTC, they can get to that and draw off of their death benefit. A traditional retirement plan is not going to have those features. So, I want to thank everybody for joining us here. I'm certainly available to assist with illustrations, or if you need to discuss the concept further. I think I do still have the PDFs from the carriers that I mentioned that cover these exact scenarios if you'd like to discuss it further. Available via phone or email, certainly. But I'll go ahead and open it up to questions, and I do want to thank all of you for your time.